Alright, I'm going to call this the Ancestor Fallacy or something along those lines. But basically, what I'm thinking with this is that people, like everyone that's on the world, is living their life for the first time. And even though they're living their life for the first time, we feel like we know what we're doing. We feel like we've experienced everything. And I think a big part of this is because we have knowledge that has been passed down to us from our ancestors. We have, schools and books and all these things that have passed down knowledge that was learned in previous generations to the generations to come. And so, because of this, we have this sense of confidence in the world that we live in and what we do and the systems that we have in place. And the reality is that just because they've worked so far doesn't mean they're going to work forever. And just because it works for them doesn't mean it'll work for us. And even though you have the, you know, information, it does not mean you have the understanding and the wisdom that it imparts. And so there's certain things about our society, there's certain things about our culture that have been constructed and we think that it is right and it's, the optimal way to do things, but we have been yet to be proven wrong. And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right, it just means that it's right so far. And that kind of gets into the whole, like, the concept of having a theory. The theory is a theory because we're pretty confident it's right, but to say it is a fundamental law is just kind of, silly. After the fundamental laws being proven wrong, then how can you tell everyone this is a fundamental law? Realistically, theories have been proven to be very accurate, but to call it a law seems an improper term after realizing how many times you got it not necessarily wrong, but not totally correct. And I feel like we really need to kind of think about that in our everyday life, because there's just certain systems that we have in place that we think are very optimal, very efficient, and we're doing it the proper way, and it's not, and it's dumb, and it's going to cause us problems in the future, but like we just aren't willing to resolve it right now because it hasn't been an issue. And that also goes into a whole other thing with people will not make a change. They won't do anything about an issue unless it's truly an awful situation. If it's a minor pain, most people will just deal with the minor pain and not resolve the problem because that's easier and it's more comfortable to have a little bit of pain than a lot of pain to remove it forever, right? They'd rather be slightly inconvenienced and deal with that than to be, put in a position where they have to change things up completely to resolve the problem completely. And so we just kind of live in this world where everyone's like, things are good, this is fine, the system is working, don't fix what ain't broken. But maybe it's not broken, but it's definitely damaged. And just because it's working right now doesn't mean it's going to work forever. And if you can see that it's failing, it's better to repair the part before it completely fails, because if it completely fails, then you got to fix the damage that failure will cause. And then you've got, this kind of runaway effect happening where damage just keeps piling up because you weren't willing to fix it before it was a problem. But yeah, that's that. Alright, so I've seen these videos often, but I've seen them, I just saw one recently, and I don't know, they always pop up because because I think I'm just the kind of person that would click on these videos, but that's why that makes me more upset.
Sorry, I got distracted. What were we talking about? We were talking about the ancestor thing. So what I was saying was that the problem is that we think that because it's always worked before, it will continue to work. And what we've found when it comes to scientific theory is that that is not always true, right? Maybe it'll work pretty well, but it's always leave it open to refinement, right? Just because it's worked this way doesn't mean it's the best way, right? Doesn't mean it's the perfect idea, doesn't mean it's the perfect theory. There's always room to improve, there's always room to make changes. And we've realized this in science. However, I don't know how well we've realized this in just living in this world. And there's certain things that we're like, well, this system has always worked, right? Like we've had our current systems of agriculture for I don't know how many years now, and it's worked very well. And so we just assume that it's going to work well forever. However, that's not necessarily true, right? If the climate changes, which the climate is changing, right, then that affects how we farm. We can't just keep farming the same way if the weather doesn't behave the same way. You have to change things up. And if you assume that things are always going to work because they always have, you're going to have problems. You need to be able to adapt. You need to be aware of changes. You need to constantly be looking for potential improvements, looking for things that maybe aren't working, and working towards solutions to solve them before they become major problems. And I don't think we're doing a good job of this right now. I feel like we've done a lot of kicking the can down the road because that's easier, right? And what I was saying with this also is that a lot of people would like to choose a minor inconvenience for the rest of their life than extreme pain for a moment, right? A lot of people would rather not have to deal with extreme pain for a short amount of time if they can. If they can avoid it, they will. Because even though doing the hard choice will lead to a more enjoyable life in the future, that hard choice is going to hurt. They don't want to make that choice. They much rather deal with the inconvenience of the problem and be inconvenienced by it forever rather than, actually address it and have to do the hard work, right? The problem is that some things you can't just keep ignoring it, right? So it's a minor inconvenience now, but that doesn't mean it's always going to be a minor inconvenience. In the future, it'll go from being a minor inconvenience to crippling. But by that point, it'll be too late to solve it, right? Because the pain you would have to go through to resolve it at that point would kill you. And now it's too late, and you're just screwed. You're dead either way. So now at this point, why even bother? You're going to die either way. And I feel like this is kind of the mentality that we are heading towards. And I think that we should change that as soon as possible, because I think that it's going to be a very big problem soon. I think that we are not ready for the world that we have made for ourselves. We don't know how to live in it because no one's lived in this world before. So no one knows what to do. And because of that, everyone's acting and, playing this role of, I know what I'm doing, I know where we're going, I have it all figured out, and they don't. And they think they have all the information, but you don't know what you don't know. And I find that to be very concerning, and I don't know how much consideration has been put towards this, but I do think it's very important because, as I said, there are certain things that they will go from being a minor inconvenience to crippling. And if you don't make the change, then, you know, we're not we're not going to make it, right? And so I think it's important to just have that thought going on constantly while you're, experiencing the world and thinking about how things are done and why they're done this way and potential problems that could come up if things change. What are the current circumstances that allow this to work so well? What happens if those get, interrupted? What happens, if our current systems fail? Then what, right? Then what? Is there a contingency? No, there's no contingency. There isn't. There's no backup plan. There is only one plan. And if that plan fails, it's game over, right? There's major problems. And I think that is our future, because I think we are so focused on the present, we don't think about what our actions are going to do for us in the future. And everyone is so caught up in the now and the craziness of now that they're not considering that if things are crazy now, imagine how insane they're going to be in the future, right? If things are bad now, when are they going to get better, right? What action is being taken to improve things? Are we improving, or are we just making it worse? Are we, reducing our problems, or are we increasing them? And from my perspective, all I see is an increase in problems and an absolute ignoring of the problems that need to be addressed. And everyone says, oh, it's not a big deal. I mean, it hasn't been a big deal so far. I mean, like the biggest example is climate change, right? And the warming of the world, right? If the climate changes, everyone's like, oh, so what if it snows a little bit more? So what if it rains a little less? And no one understands how impactful that's going to be because they've never experienced it. But when the climate changes and you can't farm where you used to have tons of farms, you are screwed. And I think that is where we're heading, and I don't think anyone is ready for it. And I think that everyone is ignoring this problem, and our current systems are going to fail. And I've said this, I think I've made a couple videos about this already now, and there's nothing I can really do about it. At this point, we may be too late. There's not enough time to properly address the situation, but we can at least start. There's the saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago or something like that. The second best time is now. Yes, it will not solve the problem right now, but it will solve the problem for the future, and we have to plan for the future before it's too late, right? Because if we're not trying to keep the next generation going, if we're not building a better future, then what are we even doing? What's the point? If humanity is going to die in 10 years, then why are we even doing anything? Like at this point, if you don't care about what happens after you die, then why do you care about what happens now? Right? Because what is the point of your life if there's no one to remember it in 10 years? Right? If there's no one to remember that you existed, and if there's nothing to observe that you were here, then what's the point? What are we after? What are we doing this for? Right? If you're just going to die and move on, what's the point of enjoying and making the most of it? What are you enjoying and making the most of it for? You won't remember it. What's the point? What's the point? The only thing that makes sense is to plan for the future, because that is your legacy. Your legacy is what comes next. It's not what happens now. You will not be remembered for what is happening now. You will be remembered for what happens in the future. And I really think I might have gone on a tangent there and gone off of what my initial thing was, but I really think we are stuck in this this delusion of what the world is. The world is not stationary, it's not stagnant, it's not unchanging. It is constantly developing, and we have increased that development process by an exponential amount. The world cannot keep up with us, and so it has altered itself in a way that now we won't be able to keep up with it. And that's a problem so long as we ignore it. Because we are not helpless in this situation. We can survive, but we have to start taking action to prepare and adapt to the changes. Because if we don't, the species that doesn't adapt to its surroundings goes extinct. That's how it's always been. And that's still how it's going to be. It doesn't matter how technologically advanced we are. If we're too stupid to adapt, we will die. So, yeah. Peace out.